Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer 55551, and I am back with a video review. And for this review, we're going to be taking a look at the Nintendo eShop release of, if I'm saying the name correctly, Shinsekai, Shinsekai, Into the Depths for the Nintendo Switch. This game's also available on the Apple Arcade service, and if you're interested in any gameplay footage, I'll have a link down in the description and you can check it out. Back in 2016, Insomniac Games, along with publisher Game Trust, which is owned by GameStop and all that stuff, published a game called Song of the Deep. This was an interesting title. This was sort of a side project from Insomniac, which had been known for games like the Resistance Fall Man, the Ratchet and Clank series, and of course, you know, the Xbox exclusive, although no longer exclusive anymore, Sunset Overdrive. Let's also not forget they also did the excellent 2018 Spider-Man game as well. But this title was a very interesting title. It was a small title and all, but it was also a very fun one. It was basically a underwater game, but with a bit of a Metroidvania style to it, though, as the story evolves around a little girl looking to discover what happened to her dad and all. I mean, it was a really neat title in a way, though. The gameplay was fun, especially, you know, moving your submarine around and all that stuff. The visuals looked really nice and everything like that, and the music was really, really good. I mean, it had a very unique charm to it, though. And from what I understand, the game did very well and so forth. The game was released on the PC, the Xbox One, and PS4. Sadly, it never came to, say, at the time, like the Wii U or even the Nintendo Switch for that matter, which is a shame because I really would have loved to see that game come to the come to those systems as well. Fast forward a couple years later, and it looks like another publisher and developer, Capcom, has basically stick their toes into sort of like taking their different approach to the whole Song of the Deep with their own game called Shinsekai. I apologize again if I'm not saying the name correctly. Now, what's interesting about this title is that this was one of the launch titles that came out last year for Apple Arcade service. This was the arcade service. This service that Apple was doing that basically you could play these games basically at a price of like $5 a month. No microtransaction, no in-game purchases, advertisements compared to what's like on the App Store. I mean, for me, it's a really neat idea, but it also depends on the type of games and all. And some games worked, some games didn't. This game, for example, I tried playing it with the touchscreen and all, and while there are those that probably could do a better job than I did, it just felt like that this was the game that would fit better with a controller rather than using the touchscreen. Even though there are some games that I think can actually benefit from touchscreens. Fast forward to 2020, and Nintendo recently had one of their directs, and interestingly, this game was announced as coming to the Nintendo Switch via Nintendo eShop. And while there are some areas of the game that I think they could have at least one area of the game that I still think is can make things a little complicated, though. I will say I started to fall in love with this game again compared to how it was on the Apple Arcade, mostly because of one thing, and I'm going to get to that, though. So why don't we get started with the pros and cons, and we'll start off first with the pros. The first one I do want to talk about is the visuals and the music. And I have to say, visually speaking, the game looks really nice, though. I love some of the art styles they did to the game. It's basically a Metroidvania, but in an underwater setting, similar to the game I mentioned, Song of the Deep. Basically, you are basically like the last human being, if I'm reading the story correctly, though. And you're basically trying to escape basically this ice that is like covering like the ocean and so forth. And basically all the designs of it look really nice, seeing the ruins of a civilization to the music, which really fits the mood into this game, though. I mean, the visuals and the music are just really nice, and I definitely I really like the music and the visual. Next thing I want to talk about is the gameplay. And the gameplay, I would sum up, is pretty much like Song of the Deep and other games I've mentioned before. This is a Metroidvania style gameplay. basically it follows the tired and true formula that you often see in a lot of Metroidvania games. You know, basically certain areas cannot be accessed until you get better equipment or upgrade your gear. That way you could go back and go maybe explore areas you might have missed. But it also adds a little bit of stuff such as not only with the exploration but also upgrading your gear and so forth. So the gameplay is kind of somewhat similar to other Metroidvania style approaches though, but still enjoyable nevertheless. And last but not least, and this is probably the big one for me, is the controls. Now, the original Apple Arcade release, when the game came out though, the controls just didn't click with me as much. I mean, while some may have found a way to use the touchscreen on your iPhone or your iPad, although I'm not sure if it supports traditional controls, like whether you have like a Bluetooth controller or a MI or MIF, if I'm saying the name correctly, type of controller though. But as far as the touchscreen goes, I found it to be extremely difficult to play this game using the touchscreen on my iPhone and so forth. So to finally have a traditional controls it's like day and night on this one. The controls, I will say, are way better than they were in, say, playing this on like using just the touchscreen only. So I definitely feel like the controls definitely make this game more enjoyable than I did when playing it on like my iPad or iPhone, just trying to figure out the touchscreen controls. So controls in this game using a traditional, traditional controller or Joy-Cons, depending if you have that. So controls are definitely better in this game. It's way better than using the touchscreen. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to part 2 of which will be the cons. So take a little break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our video review of the Nintendo eShop title Shinsekai, Shinsekai, Into the Death. Again, I apologize if I'm not saying the name correctly. So now that I gave you the pros, why don't we get started with the cons? And there really is one con, and it has to do with at least controlling your character. Now, as I mentioned in the pros part, I talked about the controls, and I felt like the controls in this one, thanks to the use of doing stuff using like the Switch Pro controller or your Joy-Cons, though the controls in the game are way better than they were when playing it on using like just the touch screen on like your iPhone or like your iPad or anything like that. That said, while the controls are definitely better, controlling your character can be a little bit difficult, and there are times when it can be a little difficult when you're trying to move your character, especially underwater, although there are some parts where you could go where you're above water and all that stuff. It can be a little difficult at times, especially trying to move your character and all that stuff. Now, I don't know if that's because that's how the developers made the game, or it's just there's an issue or anything like that, but I will say controlling, or at least shall we say moving your character around can be a bit difficult this time. Although I will say using something like, as I mentioned earlier, like the Pro controller or the Joy-Cons, I found it to be less of a hassle than compared to if I were to use like the touch screen, which sometimes your input isn't always, you don't know if your input is like spot on or not when you're using the touch screen on like your iPhone or your iPad and all that stuff. Still, it can be a little difficult at times to control your character. It's kind of almost like, if you play like a Metroid game, like Super Metroid or something like that, and you have Samus, trying to move your character underwater without having, one of the suits that makes it easier for her to move underwater. It's kind of like that in a way. Imagine playing with Samus, but not having the suit that is necessary. Like the gravity suit, I believe that's the name though. I apologize if I got the name wrong though, but imagine, being Samus, trying to control your character underwater without having the upgrade or the proper, upgrade to make it easier to move around underwater. That's what it kind of feels like a little bit when trying to control your character in this game, though. Again, it doesn't make the game unplayable, it doesn't make it broken or anything like that, and using something like the Pro controller or the Joy-Cons is certainly better than using the touchscreen. It's just, it could be difficult at times to control your character nevertheless, but having an actual, like, a real controller and all that stuff certainly helps. Overall, I would say Shinsekai, again, I know I've beaten a dead horse saying this, but I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly, though. It's a very interesting game from Capcom, though. It's a smaller title than say some of their big titles are out there, but it's also a very interesting title nevertheless, though. The music and the visuals of the game are nice. I love the gameplay and all that stuff. And again, like I said, it plays better thanks to the use of like a Pro controller and the Joy-Cons, though. Again, controlling your character can be difficult, but doesn't make the game unplayable thanks to using like a traditional controller and so forth. But it's also a very unique and interesting game, and as I mentioned earlier, it reminds me of the 2016 release of Song of the Deep. It's that unique kind of game that's nice to see some of these big studios to take a break from doing like their AAA titles and doing something small like this one, and it certainly is a fun title indeed. It is one I would recommend folks check out if you have a Nintendo Switch. As far as trying it out, as far as playing it on the Apple Arcade or anything like that, it is worth taking a look at it on the Apple Arcade. But just remember, unless you have like a controller, synced with like either if you're playing this on an iMac or your iPhone or iPad, though, I found the touchscreen controllers to be a little bit difficult. So if you have like a controller, whether it's a PS4 controller, which I can sync to my iMac and all that stuff, or any kind of controller, Bluetooth or not, it's recommended that if you're going to play this game, use a traditional controller. It's much better than using the touchscreen. But regardless of whether you use just the Apple Arcade or you have the Nintendo eShop, this is definitely a game I would recommend you take a look at, though. And it would be interesting to see if Capcom does more of these like smaller titles like these down the road, and I would be open for a sequel and all that stuff. So overall, it's worth the title in my view, worth taking a look at. Okay, this concludes my video review of Shinsekai. Yeah, I know, I don't have a hard time saying the name correctly. Into the Depths. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about this game? Have you tried this out or downloaded it on the Nintendo eShop, or have you played it on the Apple Arcade? Do you think it's a fun game? Do you like the visuals, the music, or the Metroid style gameplay? Did you find playing it with a Pro controller or the Joy-Con, the experience was better than, say, using the touchscreen, or did you not have any issue with the touchscreen at all? Do you think it's worth getting it on the Nintendo Switch, or do you think it's one of those titles that's best to stay on the Apple Arcade? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You can do it through PayPal me or Patreon. Links will be in the description of this video. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, wish you all a good day then. Bye!